G'day and welcome back to Disc Golf Down Under. It's Matt here, and today I've got a huge video for you. Now, MVP have, in my opinion, the best selection of mid-range discs available, from the super understable Paradox all the way through to the very overstable Deflector. And guess what? I've got them all here. So sit back, strap in and get ready for the MVP Mega Mid-Range review. Now, quick disclaimer before we get started. I have no commercial arrangement with MVP, or any disc golf retailers for that matter. I've purchased all of these discs with my own money, and I've had many of them for some time. And instead of just getting a brand new disc and doing a rush review after a handful of throws in a field, I always like to throw a disc for a few months in all sorts of conditions before giving my honest and unbiased opinion. So I've been working on this video for many months now and was tossing up splitting this review into a couple of different videos, but in the end I've decided to keep it all together. And so this is a much longer video than usual. And to make it easier to navigate, I've broken the video into some parts and chapters, and you can find the timestamps in the video description. Okay, so right now it's early 2024 and MVP has 10 discs in production that they classify as a mid-range driver. And they are the discs that this review will be covering. And just in case you're completely new to MVP, we're talking about 3 different brands or product lines. So we've got the MVP branded discs that have the black overmold rim. Then we've got the Axiom brand discs that have the colored overmold rims. And then we have the Streamline brand discs that are non-gyro and done in a solo mold, so no overmold. Now, the review section of this video is broken into 4 parts. Starting with part 1, I'll be looking at the understable mids, covering the Paradox, the Uplink and the Detour. Then in part 2, I'll look at the stable or neutral mid-ranges, including the Echo, the Hex, the Reactor and the Matrix. And then in part 3, I'll move on to the overstable mids, the Pyro, Runway and the Deflector. But that's not all, because in part 4, I'll take a look at 7 mid-ranges that MVP are no longer making, but you may find them kicking around out there in the wild. Okay, let's start with the understable mid-ranges, and these are the discs that when thrown flat by an average right-hand backhand player, they tend to move to the right. These discs have a much higher turn at high speed and 0 or little fade at low speed. So basically, if you add the 3rd and the 4th numbers of the flight rating together, if that sum's negative, the disc is on the understable spectrum. Now, understable discs are great for beginners, and for the more experienced players, they're also useful as hyzer flip and turnover discs. So our 3 understable discs are the Axiom Paradox, the MVP Uplink, and the MVP Detour. You can see the vital stats for these discs on screen, and you can see that dimensionally that they are very similar. All 3 are relatively new to the scene, hitting the market in the last 3 years, and all are speed 5 with a 13mm rim and currently available only in neutron plastic. Okay, let's start with the Axiom Paradox, MVP's most understable disc. It was released in August of 2021 with a flight rating of 5.4, -4.0, and it's normally available in neutron plastic only, but there has been at least one run of the watermelon style Proton Paradox. Now, at the time of launch, there was a lot of hype around this disc, and so I grabbed this special edition Paradox to see whether the hype was real. And well, yes, this disc was something different. Now, at the time, MVP didn't really have an understable mid besides the Axiom Theory, which was only mildly understable and nothing compared to discs like the Latitude 64 Fuse or the Discraft Commodore Meteor. And out of the box, this disc is super flippy, very understable. And it didn't take long to beat in either, I think because the disc just wants to turn over and dive into the ground and turn into a roller all the time. It just beats in faster than discs that normally land flat. So today, throwing my close to max weight neutron Paradox on a very steep hyzer and at about half power, this disc just flips up and still wants to go right. I've not seen anything like this, and it sort of reminds me of throwing a paper plate. Throw it flat, and again with about half power and with some height, and it pushes right. This disc has absolutely 0 fade unless you throw it nose up and stall the disc. And predictably, put the Paradox on Anheuser and you cannot stop this thing from rolling. Beginner friendly? Well, perhaps, but I don't think it would take long to outgrow this disc, and personally I find it extremely difficult to control. You have to get your release angle and speed perfect to get it to go where you want it. Now, I did bag the Paradox for a very short while, but for me it's truly a utility disc for those unusual situations and specific hole designs. On Infinite Discs, the Paradox has an average review score of 4.56 out of 5, so it does have plenty of fans, but not pure love. And in my opinion, there are currently 2 or 3 better alternatives that I find more useful, including the Glitch and some of the other mid-ranges, which we'll get to shortly. Next, let's talk MVP Uplink, the featured disc of the 2021 Gyropalooza pack, which was released in November 2021 and available in general release a few months later in early 2022. The Uplink is more stable than the Paradox and has more glide with a flight rating of 5.5, -3.5. And I scored this 178 gram special edition Neutron Uplink, and out of the box, this was the disc that replaced the fuse in my bag. Now, due to a history of shoulder injuries, I can no longer throw forehand, so I really depend on my turnovers, and this quickly became a new favorite. And when you have a favorite disc, you of course need backups. So when the general release came, I picked up this 177 gram Neutron Uplink. And then more recently, I picked up a 178 gram MVP Open Uplink in the 2023 Gyropalooza box. Now, the community have commented the special edition Uplink from the 2021 run is not as understable as the runs that followed. And I have to agree with that. My fully seasoned Gyropalooza Uplink flies very similar to a brand new unseasoned Uplink from the more recent runs. And I'd go as far as saying the special edition has a flight rating closer to 5.5 -2.5. Now, the Uplink is a hyzer flip demon with loads of glide, great for tunnel shots, flips up and continues pushing straight with a little fade at the end. And for turnovers, I love the Uplink. Throw it flat with a bit of height and you can navigate turns to the right. Throw it on an anhyzer, and as long as you don't overpower it, the Uplink still remains controllable and much more useful than the Paradox, and a must for any disc golfer lacking a forehand. For me, it feels great. Flies great and is useful as both a utility disc, a shot shaping disc, and a hyzer flip tunnel driver. 9 times out of 10, the Uplink goes where I want it to go. And on Infinite Discs, the Uplink has an average review score of 4.87 out of 5, making it MVP's most loved mid-range based on customer reviews. Now, if you don't have an Uplink, get one. Max weight preferably, and if you see a special edition one, shut up and take my money. Moving along to our final understable mid and the newly released MVP Detour, the 4th disc in James Conrad's line of discs. Now, the Detour was the featured disc of the 2023 Gyropalooza box from November last year and is not yet available in general release, but I expect it's not far away. And I scored this 171 gram Neutron Detour in the 2023 box, and honestly, it was the only reason I bought the box. I'm a huge fan of James Conrad, and if you've watched him play, you know he loves to throw long turning backhand shots, and the Detour is pitched as sitting between the Uplink and the Hex with a flight rating of 5, -2, and 1. Now, my Detour is far from max weight and still seasoning in, but I feel it fits that gap perfectly. It has less turn than the Uplink and some nice stability to give it a fading finish. Put it on some hyzer, it flips up nicely to flat and glides straight before having a decent fade to finish. Throwing the Detour flat and it will turn nicely and hold before fading back for a flat finish. And put it on anhyzer with some height and it will turn nicely to the right. And when I'm playing at altitude where discs fly more stable, the Detour currently flies laser straight. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this disc seasons in over the next few months. And so far it's staying in the bag. Next, let's look at MVP's stable mid-ranges. The neutral flying discs that when thrown flat have some high-speed turn and a similar amount of low-speed fade. So they tend to end up finishing close to the line where you aim them. And these types of mid-ranges are useful for all player levels and tend to be a workhorse with most players bagging at least one neutral mid-range. These discs are also your shot shaping discs, and you can put them on any angle and they'll tend to hold that angle throughout the flight. So in this class we have 4 discs, and you can see the stats on screen. In this group we've got the Streamline Echo, the Axiom Hex, MVP Reactor and the MVP Matrix. Again, similar to the understable mids, they're all speed 5 with a 13mm rim. Okay, so let's continue working up the stability range and the Streamline Echo, which debuted in the 2022 Circuit Challenge Players Pack, followed by a general release in April 2023. Now, the Echo has a flight rating of 5, 5, -1.5 and 1, and is generally available in neutron and cosmic neutron plastics. But there's also been a special edition OTB Open Echo released in the Proton soft plastic. And I picked up one of these around 6 months ago, followed by a cosmic neutron Echo in the 2023 Gyropalooza box. Now, I've actually been really impressed with the Echo. Feels great in the hand, especially in this soft Proton plastic. And when thrown on a hyzer, you'll get a nice flip up with plenty of glide and then a gentle fade at the end. And on a flat release, the Echo will turn similar to the Detour and fade back to finish flat. And of course, put this disc on anhyzer release and you can get a nice turnover and enough stability that it won't burn over and turn into a roller. Now, this solo mold is a real sleeper and has been hugely overshadowed by the popular Hex, which I'll get to in a minute. And so far, reviews on Infinite discs have been 100% positive, but more reviews are needed before comparisons can be made. Now, if you're looking for a Hex but with more turn, the Echo is what you're looking for. If you're a beginner and want a straight flying mid, the Echo might be the disc for you. Personally, I don't bag the Echo, but that's only because of the discs positioned either side of it, the Detour and our next disc, the Hex. The Axiom Hex was released in June 2021 and has been one of the top selling discs on the global market over the last 2.5 years, and for good reason. With a flight rating of 5, 5, -1, 1, the Hex is positioned as the straight stable mid and goes head to head with the ever popular Discraft Buzz. The Hex is generally available in neutron. It also comes in the Lizodal Eclipse and comes in fission. Plus there's also been a special release in R2 in the Gyropalooza box, and also some watermelon Proton Hexes as well. Weights range from 155 up to max weight of 178 grams. And on Infinite discs, the Hex has an average review score of 4.84 out of 5, showing that it is highly respected. And shortly after the Hex was released, I did a Buzz versus a Hex showdown video, and controversially, I gave the win to the Buzz. However, about 12 months ago, following the signing of Simon Lizotte to MVP, we had the release of the Lizodal, special edition Hex in MVP's Glow Eclipse plastic. And for me, this disc changed my mind, and it looks like many people agree, with the Buzz having an average Infinite disc review score of 4.8, a fraction below that of the Hex. Now, I love the feel of the Lizodal in the hand, and I fell in love with how straight this disc flies. The Hex just follows or holds any line you put on it. Put it on a hyzer and it might flip up a tiny bit, but generally it will hold the angle you put on the disc. Throw it flat, you might get a slight bit of turn before a gentle fade back to finish straight. put it on at any to get some nice turn, again with some gentle fade at the end. Now with regards to stability, I've found that all the plastics basically fly the same, and where you can see the differences is in the weights. Max weights will give you more stability and the lighter weights less stability with more turn. Now prior to the launch of the Uplink, I was bagging a max weight hex, this special edition one, for the straight stable mid slot, and also a lightweight hex for the less stable turning mid. And these days I bag the Lazottle. One of my most often thrown discs. When people ask me which MVP discs they should consider buying, the Hex is always in my list of must-haves. And if you're wondering what the others are, the Crave and the Envy. Moving along now, and the next two mids fly very similar and are quite hard to split. First up, I'll start with the oldest MVP mid-range still in production as of 2024, and that is the MVP Matrix, which first circulated in the 2016 Circuit Challenge Players Pack and then saw a general release in March 2018. It has a flight rating of 5, 4, -1, 2 and is available in neutron, proton and also in electron plastics. Now prior to the Hex, the Matrix was a very popular disc in the MVP range, and I've had the Proton Matrix since mid-2018, one of my first MVP discs. And back then I used the Matrix a lot. And after a lot of beating in, this disc now flies similar to the Hex, but with a tick more stability. Now in 2019, MVP released the Electron Matrix. And anybody familiar with MVP's base plastic knows that it beats in faster and subsequently has a less stable flight rating with a 1.5 fade instead of 2. And at this time, the Electron Matrix became a popular choice for that straight stable mid slot. And that was until the Hex came along in 2021. Now, I really like the feel of the Matrix in the hand, even today. Throw it on a hyzer and you'll see some flip up, and then it will settle into a predictable fade without too much glide. Generally, it holds the hyzer angle that you put on the disc. And for me, I can really notice the difference in stability with the Electron plastic. If for whatever reason you don't like the Hex, have a look, see if you can find an Electron Matrix and give that a go. Release the Matrix flat and it will turn similar to the Hex, but then it has a much stronger fade back to the left at the end of its flight. And on an anhyzer release, the Matrix will hold that initial angle nicely with a fading finish. Now, at Infinite Discs, the Matrix has an average review score of 4.56 out of 5. Now, do I bag a Matrix today? Well, no. For me, it's a tough one, but I do prefer the next disc in the stable range. The MVP Reactor was released in March 2020 and has a flight rating of 5, 5, -0.5, 1.5. It's currently available in neutron, also available in Eclipse, and fission plastic from 155 up to 177 grams. Now, the Reactor was a bit of a strange release for me, as it has similar flight numbers to the Matrix. Practically, the Reactor has a tick more glide and a more straighter flight. And whereas the Matrix tends to flip and then fade back harder, the Reactor has a much more gentler and less curvy flight path, requiring less fairway width to work with. Thrown on a hyzer, the Reactor will hold the angle and finish very predictably. And I really like the Reactor for precision hyzer upshots. When thrown flat, the Reactor will generally track straight for the first 80% of the flight before fading out nicely at the end. And on an anhyzer release, it will hold that angle before straightening up at the end. Now, I didn't notice much difference between the flight of the neutron and the eclipse plastics. However, the fission plastic does season quicker, and I did notice a smidge less stability, especially in the lighter weight fission reactors. So if you're looking for a mid-range that you can really power up and have the disc hold its line, a fission reactor is definitely worth a look. Almost behaves like a fairway driver. And I also know some people prefer a lighter fission reactor in place of a hex. And on infinite discs, the reactor has an average review score of 4.85 out of 5, placing it just in front of the hex at 4.84. And personally, I bag this neutron reactor and use it for controlled upshots where I don't want too much right to left movement. Okay, our final group of mid-ranges are the overstable mids, the beefy boys. These are the discs that when thrown flat by a right-handed backhand player want to get left. They have zero turn at high speed and lots of fade at low speed. And these discs are not generally beginner friendly, but they are an important tool once you get to that intermediate and advanced level. Now, each of the brands has an overstable mid, from the Axiom Pyro to the Streamline Runway and the MVP Deflector. And here's the specs on screen for our 3 overstable mids. Again, they're all speed 5, but with reduced glide and 0 turn. The Runway has a 13mm rim, while the Deflector and the Pyro have 14.5mm rims. So let's continue up our hill or mountain of increasing stability, and our next stop is the Axiom Pyro, which was launched in February 2019 in a new Prism Proton plastic. The Pyro has a flight rating of 5402.5 and is available in weights up to 179 grams. And in addition to the Prism Proton plastic, there's also been runs in Prism Plasma and Prism Neutron. And for those unfamiliar with MVP plastics, Prism is where the overmold rim is made using MVP's translucent proton plastic along with some metal flakes. Now, the Pyro has been a bit of a sleeper, not really taking off at launch, but popularity has grown and now it's finding its way into a lot of players' bags. On infinite discs, the average review score is 4.59 out of 5, so it's not loved as much as some of the other MVP mids, but it does have a following. The Pyro has a good amount of stability while still retaining a reasonable amount of glide, and when thrown on hyzer, it has a nice right to left shape, good for getting around corners without dumping out early. Also has a nice flare skip when you need even more movement to the left, or right if thrown forehand. And talking of forehands, the Pyro is a very popular forehand disc, great for flex shots when thrown on anhyzer, and with 0 turn, the Pyro is also very dependable and reliable in the wind. It has to be a fairly strong wind or thrown with loads of power to get this disc to flip. I love a good overstable disc, and the Pyro is a staple in my bag and comes out when I need to shape around an obstructed upshot. Okay, moving further towards the very overstable end of the charts, we've got the Streamline Runway, which was released in August 2018, has a flight rating of 5403.5 and is available only in neutron and cosmic neutron plastics in weights from 170 to 179 grams. Now, this solo mold disc is very overstable and pushes this disc into a utility slot. I've got a fairly lightweight neutron runway which has 0 turn and starts fading straight out of the hand. It also lacks glide, and to get to the basket I have to really rip on this disc. Otherwise it likes to dump hard left when thrown on hyzer or flat release. Now, where it might be useful is when thrown on considerable anhyzer to produce a more of a flex line through a gap, but beware the flare skip. This disc is like Skippy the kangaroo. Now, maybe it's the lack of gyro, but the Runway is my second least favorite disc and not for me. However, at infinite discs, the Runway has an average review of 4.79 out of 5, so maybe I'm just wrong. Finally, on to MVP's most overstable mid-range, the Deflector, which was released in June of 2018, shortly after the Matrix. It has a flight rating of 3.504 and is available in neutron, proton and eclipse plastics from 170 to 178 grams. Now, in 2023, there was a special edition OTB Open Deflector in proton soft plastic. Now, this disc is something special, and I'll talk a bit more about the OTB Open Deflector in a minute. But first, back to this neutron deflector, which is a disc that I've had in my bag for many years, and it's a pure utility disc with loads of beef. With a fade rating of 4, you know this disc is going to be overstable, and it sure is. It's board flat on top and feels great in the hand. If you're familiar with the MVP resistor, this disc is the younger brother. Very reliable for precision hyzer upshots and no issue with strong headwinds. Thrown flat, it moves nicely to the left with plenty of flare skip, so great for shaping those right to left low ceiling upshots. It's also not bad for extreme flex shots thrown with plenty of anhyzer. Now, this disc doesn't have much glide, so you have to power it up if you want to get the distance. Now, at infinite discs, the Deflector scores an average review of 4.75 out of 5. Okay, what about the OTB open deflector in the Proton soft plastic? Well, it has the same wing shape, appears to come from the same mold with identical embossing, but this OTB open deflector has the stability dialed up to 11 and glide has been severely knocked down. I personally rate this disc as a 5, 3, plus 1, 4, and at full power I'm lucky to get this disc to 60 meters. Even with some flex, I'm not making circle 1 at 80 meters, and boy does this disc want to dump hard left. Nevertheless, I love this disc and I've switched out my neutron deflector for what I call Deflector OS. It fills that overstable utility shot nicely for me, and I find myself using this disc more and more often than you'd expect, especially when it's windy. Now, they were a limited release, but if you see one, grab one while you can. The Proton soft plastic feels great, and I love to see more MVP discs released in this gummy soft plastic. Okay, so you've seen the 10 MVP mid-ranges that are currently in production as of early 2024. However, MVP's been making discs for almost 15 years now, and mid-ranges featured heavily in the early years, with 7 mids released between 2010 and 2017. But when MVP moved to 100% in-house production in 2019, they made an unpopular announcement that they were discontinuing 7 mid-ranges as they were manufactured using molds that were not compatible with MVP's new injection machines. Now, for those new to MVP, the 2-piece discs are molded in 2 shots. The core, or the flight plate, is molded first, and then the rim is molded to the outside of the core. And MVP would use the same core for many discs and just change the overmold rim. And most, if not all, of the discontinued mids use the same core mold. Now, it was a very unpopular announcement at the time, but right now I believe the mid-range lineup is better than ever. So you're very unlikely to see these out of production discs at your local disc retailer, but you may find them in second-hand bins and at buy swap sell meets, and some of them are still highly sought after. So what do we have, and are they any good? Well, here's the specs on screen, and you'll see that 5 of these mids are 4 speeds and the other 2 are 5 speed. And all but one of the discontinued mids have a glide of 4. So, going back and starting at the understable end of the spectrum, we've got the MVP Vertex, which was actually the last of the discontinued mids to be released in August of 2017. Has a flight rating of 4, 4, -2.5, but public consensus was that it was more understable than the numbers and received very mixed reviews. Now, I've never tried the Vertex, and it's been replaced today by the Uplink and the Paradox. Moving along to the Axiom Theory, which was released in September 2014 with a flight rating of 4, 4, -1.51, and a mid-range that I had a love-hate relationship with. I hated the feel in the hand, but I loved the turning flight. For me, it didn't quite replace the fuse that I had in my bag, but it was a great disc for half-power shots. A good comparison would be a longer Axiom Proxy, and has since been replaced by the recent Streamline Echo and perhaps the Detour. Now, next up we have 3 discs that I'm going to group together. We've got the Axiom Alias from January 2014, the MVP Axis released in July 2011, and the MVP Tangent launched in February 2013. Now, they're all variations on the straight stable mid, and the axis and the tangent still have a fairly strong fan base today. Me, not a fan. I bagged the axis for a short while before changing to the theory, and I dabbled with the tangent, but just like the theory, I hated the hand feel and just didn't feel comfortable throwing them. I wanted to like the axis, but I couldn't trust the disc, and more often than not I'd burn it over. So the axis got sold, and the tangent got passed on to Mrs. Down Under, who likes the tangent and still bags it today. Now, our final two discontinued overstabled mids are the MVP Vector, which was MVP's first mid released in December 2010, and the MVP Tensor, which was released in April 2013. Now, at the time, this would have been MVP's equivalent of the Innova Shark and the Shark 3 mids, which are still a staple of the Innova starter pack today. And I grabbed a Vector hoping it would be a longer Envy, but I was just disappointed. It didn't gel with me, and it went straight back on the rack after a few rounds. Just didn't have the stability that I wanted. And today these discs have since been replaced by the Reactor and the Pyro. So, will we see MVP resurrect any of these 7 mids? Well, I guess you can never say never, but I really see no reason why they need to with their current strong lineup of mid-ranges. Anyway, what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you think MVP should bring back one or more of these discontinued discs. Well, if you've made it this far, well done. That was a very deep dive down the MVP rabbit hole, and something I've been wanting to do for more than 12 months now. Did you like this type of review video? Let me know in the comments if you did. Well, anyway, MVP's mid-range offering, I believe, is the most complete and the best out there. From the super flippy Paradox, through to the ever popular Hex, and to the super beefy Deflector. And you may not like every single disc, but there's definitely one or more discs that every disc golfer will enjoy. Personally, I've got plenty of room in my Zuka cart, so I'm bagging 6 different MVP mids, and they all get plenty of use. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Let me know in the comments what your favorite MVP mid is, and which one you don't have, but you'd like to try out. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this one, and I hope you like this style of mega review. If you're not yet a subscriber, well, I'll leave that up to you, but a reminder, the button's down there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.